Welcome to a deep dive into, well, let's be honest, a topic that doesn't exactly scream excitement, contract law. But don't hit that stop button just yet. We're going on a wild ride through offers, acceptances, and those pesky additional terms that can make or break a deal.
You're right, it's not the most thrilling topic at a cocktail party, but honestly, this stuff matters. Every time you agree to pretty much anything, from grabbing a coffee to signing a big money deal, you're stepping into the world of contracts.
So true. And luckily for you, we've got the inside scoop. We're talking excerpts from all the important legal texts from common law to the UCC. That's the Uniform Commercial Code for those in the know. Plus, we got some real-life court cases that are like legal thrillers.
You wouldn't believe how often things go sideways in the world of contracts. These examples are the best way to see those rules in action, trust me.
Okay, let's kick things off with a common law classic, the mirror image rule. Imagine holding a mirror up to an offer you've made.
And for the acceptance to be legit, it's got to be a perfect reflection. No smudges, no distortions. It's strict.
So if there's even a tiny change, like tweaking the quantity or messing with the delivery date,
Boom, that acceptance turns into a counteroffer. Basically, it's like hitting the reject button on the original offer, which, let me tell you, can really throw a wrench in negotiations.
which brings us to our first case, Minneapolis and St. Louis Railway, way back in 1886. Picture this. A railway company. They're all set to accept this offer for iron rails. But get this, they slightly change the quantity they want. You'd think, no big deal, right?
You'd think so, but the mirror image rule says, nope, not so fast. That tiny little change turned their acceptance into a counteroffer. And guess what? The deal fell apart because that original offer was off the table.
So precision is key, people. When you're drafting those acceptances, dot your I's and cross your T's, because even what seems like a minor blip can totally derail a deal, especially when this mirror image rule is in play.
Absolutely. Now, the mirror image rule, that's pretty hardcore. But luckily, the UCC, which basically calls the shots on contracts for buying and selling goods, offers a bit of breathing room, especially when things get, shall we say, unexpected. This is where UCC 2206 steps in, dealing with something called accommodations.
Okay, now this is where it gets juicy. I'm imagining a scenario. A seller gets this massive order, right? And suddenly they're like, oh, wait a minute, we're actually low on stock. What do we do? Can they just send part of the order and call it a day?
That's exactly what UCC 2206 is for. It lets sellers send a partial shipment, they call it an accommodation, with every intention of sending the rest later. It's like saying, hey, we're a little in over our heads right now, but we're on it. You'll get the rest ASAP.
Ah, so it's like a contract rain check.
hmm
I have a feeling there are some rules around this whole accommodation thing because, well, you don't want sellers taking advantage of the situation.
Oh, you better believe there are rules. This accommodation concept was actually at the center of a pretty big case. Corinthian Pharmaceutical Systems v. Literal Labs. We're talking vaccines here. A pharmacy ordered a whole bunch, but instead of just accepting the offer, the lab, they sent a partial order at the original price. Then, get this, they jacked up the price for the remaining doses, trying to say it was an accommodation. Can you believe that?
No way. Trying to use the UCC to pull a fast one? That's bold.
Yeah.
So what happened? Did the court fall for that accommodation excuse?
No way. The court saw right through it. They basically said, nice try, but upping the price on a partial shipment, that's not a real accommodation. That's trying to change the deal. So the court sided with the pharmacy, making it crystal clear that this UCC rule, it's there to make things easier, not to let sellers surprise buyers with sudden price hikes.
Phew, that's a relief. All right, so we've tackled the mirror image rule. We've seen how the UCC gives a little wiggle room with these accommodations, but what about those sneaky additional terms that always seem to pop up out of nowhere? That's where UCC 2207 comes in, right?
You got it. UCC 2207, this is where things get really interesting, especially in the business world. You know those terms and conditions we all love to scroll through but never really read?
Oh, you mean the ones where you just click agree, cross your fingers, and hope you haven't signed away your firstborn, those terms and conditions?
Exactly. UCC 2207, it's here to deal with those situations where someone says, sure, I accept, but then they slip in those extra terms, the ones that can really change the whole game. It's like you're both on the same page for the main course, but then someone throws in an unexpected side dish. And sometimes that side dish, it's a deal breaker.
So it's like ordering a delicious meal, looks great on the menu, but then, bam, hidden air tax on the bill because you dared to breathe while enjoying your food.
You nailed it. And the UCC, it's all about fairness. It says those added terms, they can become part of the deal, but hold on, there are some big exceptions. And this is where those court cases we talked about, they really shed some light on things.
Okay, hit me with those exceptions. This is where knowing the law can really save your bacon.
All right, exception number one. If that extra term materially alters the contract, and we're not talking about a typo in the address here, we're talking a change so big, so significant, that it would make you rethink the whole deal. Think of it like you're buying a house, right? You see pictures online, beautiful backyard, looks amazing, but then you show up and boom, it's a parking lot. Not exactly what you signed up for, right?
Yeah, that's a bit of a difference. So a material alteration, it's like a bait and switch, but in contract form.
Exactly. And we've got a perfect example for you, DTE Energy Technologies case. Two companies, they're hammering out a contract, seems pretty standard. But then one of them sneaks in this forum selection clause. Sounds super boring, right?
Unless you're a lawyer who loves reading legal jargon, probably not the most thrilling part of a contract. What does a forum selection clause even do?
Well, it basically dictates where any legal battles have to go down.
Yeah.
Sounds minor, but think about it. This little clause could mean one party has to fly across the country, hire a whole new legal team just to argue their case. That's not just inconvenient, that's expensive.
Travel costs, lawyer fees, that adds up quickly. I can see why that would be a problem.
The court thought so too. They ruled that this forum selection clause, it was a material alteration, and because it wasn't clearly agreed upon beforehand, it was a no-go, unenforceable. The lesson here, even if you think it's a small detail, you can't just spring these major changes on someone and expect it to fly.
Okay, so that's one way an extra term can get the boot if it's a material alteration.
Yeah.
What about the Textile Unlimited case? That one involved a sneaky arbitration clause, didn't it?
It sure did. We're talking yarn here, lots of yarn. Textile Unlimited, they placed a huge order with BMH, but when the yarn arrived, it was a disaster, full of flaws. Naturally, they wanted to sue, but BMH, they had this clever little plan. They tucked an arbitration clause into the fine print of an invoice.
Classic. Let's bury this crucial legal detail in a mountain of paperwork and hope no one notices. So did it work? Did the court let them get away with that?
This is where it gets interesting. The court sided with Textile Unlimited. They basically said, look, you already had an agreement. They placed the order. You shipped the yarn. That's a done deal. You can't just add a major term like an arbitration clause after the fact. It's got to be agreed upon up front.
So both DTE Energy and Textile Unlimited, they show us that while the UCC tries to keep things flexible, it's not a free-for-all. You can't just try to pull a fast one and expect the courts to back you up.
Exactly. It all comes down to being upfront and transparent. You've got to know what you're agreeing to, and that means reading the fine print, even if it makes your eyes glaze over. Trust me, it's better than the alternative.
So for our listeners, what's the key takeaway here? What do they need to remember when navigating the sometimes murky waters of contract law?
It's all about being informed and proactive. Don't be afraid to speak up, ask those questions if something doesn't seem right, and for goodness sake, read the fine print. I know it's like reading a foreign language sometimes, but trust me, it's better to know what you're getting into.
Absolutely. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, especially in the world of contracts. Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, from that super strict mirror image rule to the UCC, trying to keep things a little more flexible. And let's not forget those additional terms, always lurking in the shadows, waiting to trip us up.
And those real-world cases we talked about, those are the real eye-openers. They show us how these legal rules, they're not just abstract ideas, they have real consequences in everyday business.
So true. It's like those cautionary tales, reminding us that even a seemingly small detail in a contract can make a world of difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that brings us to a final thought for our listeners today. Think about your own non-negotiables, those deal breakers, the things you absolutely have to have in an agreement.
Oh, that's good. The things you need to nail down right from the start.
Exactly. Maybe it's a specific payment plan, crystal clear liability clauses, a rock-solid delivery schedule, whatever it is. Know what those non-negotiables are and make sure they're spelled out in black and white before you sign on the dotted line. It's about protecting yourself, making sure you're making smart agreements.
Such great advice. So to all our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this. What are your non-negotiables? Think about it, and next time you're looking at a contract, you'll be ready to negotiate like a pro. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of contract law.